portion, we're going to look at questions 25 through 46. We'll go through the answers first, and we'll go back through and we'll answer whatever questions you missed. Number 25 is B. 26 is G. 27 is E. 28 is H. Okay. Next column, 29 is C. 30 is G. 31 is D. 32 is K. Okay. 33 is B. 34 is H. 35 is D. 36 is J. 37 is A. 38 is F. Next page. 39 is B. 40 is F. 41 is E. 42 is K. Is that working out for you guys? I'm hoping that you are looking for the letters. If you need the actual values for these questions, I'll go back and do that for any ones that you might have missed or have questions on. Okay, 43 is D. 44 is G. 45 is D. And 46 is J. Do I need to go back and give you the answers on any of those? Okay. All right, we're going to scroll back up to 25. Because of what? Yeah. Well, yeah, and the next section is going to be even harder because we're getting at the end of the test. All right, so we should see a progression of difficulty as we go through these. All right, 25 through 28. Go ahead. 26, 27, 28. 26, 26. Okay, so 26 in the figure shown below, the measure of BAC is x plus 20. So we have x plus 20. Okay, BAD, this whole angle is 90. What is the measure of angle CAD? Okay, so what we want to imagine here, let's pick a different variable for angle CAD. Okay, let's call angle CAD, let's call it Z, right? Just so that I'm using a single variable. Well, Z plus x plus 20. Okay, this is a specific angle, right? We know that if I add these two together, I'm going to get 90, right? So if I want to solve for Z, I need to subtract x plus 20 from 90. So I'm taking 90 minus x plus 20. I'm subtracting the whole angle. So what I need to do is I need to distribute the negative. So I'm going to rewrite that as 90 minus x minus. I can combine like terms. 90 minus 20 is 70. 70 minus x, okay, in degrees. Okay, and you'll notice that I could also, let's see if I've got that right. Your answer on that is 70 minus x. Okay, because they are complementary, right? Complementary means they add up to 90, so, all right, so I'm going to subtract that degree from 90 and then simplify. Does that make a little bit more sense now? Okay. All right. Let's see, how many of you had 26? Was that more, 2 or 3 of you? Okay, do all 3 of us get this now? All right, and then you said 27 and 28. Okay, what is the perimeter? Notice that they give you a lot of helpful information here. They tell you that this is isosceles. It's an isosceles right with a hypotenuse of 8 radical 2. So I'm going to put that in there. All right, because it's an isosceles right triangle, it's a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. Okay, which means I'm dealing with a ratio of x to x to x radical 2. So if this is 8 radical 2, then I know this is 8 and 8. Okay, so I'm going to add these up. 8 plus 8 is 16. I can't, 8 radical 2 is not a like term, so I'm winding up with 16 plus 8 radical 2 for my perimeter. Okay, so if I sound super stuffed up and my voice is really weird and I'm like gagging, it's because my face is full of like gross stuff. So. All right, 28. All right, let's see. This one's actually fairly simple. It says, when y equals 0, which of the following best describes the solutions for x? Well, where y equals 0 is a horizontal line that represents the x-axis. Okay? So if we're looking for which of the following best describes the solutions for x, this is where it crosses the x-axis at, which is why we see H as an answer, because there is one positive solution, one positive real solution, and one real negative solution, okay, just based upon where it crosses the x-axis at. So there's actually no math to know that, to do there, but you have to have an understanding of what is y equals 0 and what does it mean to have a solution. Okay? Okay. Let's come up to the next column, 29 through 32. Anything on this column here? 29. You said 31 and 32, so we're going to skip 30. Who was 29? Okay, JP. What is the product of the complex numbers? Product means to do what? Multiply. So we are taking negative 3i plus 4 times 3i times 3i plus 4. So what am I doing here? What's the process? Exactly right. All right, so what is, and because we're dealing with, all they mean by complex is that we have i's. All right, so what's negative 3 times 3? All right, what's I times I? All right, what is I squared equivalent to? Negative 1. So what I'm getting is I'm getting negative 9 times negative 1. What's negative 9 times negative 1? 9. Okay, so my first deal there is 9. After that, what is negative 3i times 4? Well, what's negative 3 times 4? And then we've got an I, so negative 12i. All right, let's come over here. What's 4 times 3i? Positive 12i. Okay, and what's 4 times 4? All right, what's going to happen with those 12 i's? Cancel out. What's 9 plus 16? 25. Okay? Yeah. Okay, we got to remember our I rules. Okay? Let's see, 31 and 32. Okay? Probability question here. To make a 750-piece jigsaw puzzle more challenging, puzzle box includes 5 extra pieces. All right, so how many total pieces are there now? 755. How many odd pieces are there? How many? There's 5. So probability is number of desired over total. All right? And because the question is, what is the probability that it will be one of the extra pieces? Well, there are 5 extra pieces, and there are 755 total pieces. So let's see. I get D for that. Right? And that's fairly short and simple. Okay? So we have to remember, it's helpful to remember what is the definition of probability. That'll make your life a lot simpler. Okay, number of desired over number total. Once you identify what is desired, how many are desired, and what is my total number, all you have to do really there is simplify. Okay, you said 32. 32 actually goes back to an equation that we learned several lessons back. Okay, and I don't know how many of you knew to use this equation. Okay, but the equation, you'll probably remember it as soon as I draw it up here. Initial plus change times final minus initial. Anybody remember this, or at least rings a bell? You know, it's like what is 2/3 of the way from this fraction to this fraction? Okay, so that's what I use to solve this. So our initial is 2/3, right? From 2/3 to something else, right? So 2/3, okay? And the change is right here. Okay, they didn't give it to me as a fraction, but it says halfway, so that's 1/2. 2 3/4, so that's my final 3/4 minus my initial 2/3. Okay. From there, I plug this in a calculator. So the first thing you do have to follow order of operations. So I took 3/4 minus 2/3, found out what that was going to be. Right. I didn't take time to draw this out and get a common denominator. I just let. You need to go to the restroom or something?
No. Didn't you just put 2/3 plus 3/4 in the calculator and divide it by 2?
You could probably do that. Okay. Wait, you said 2/3 plus 3/4?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to work every time. Because you're talking about, it might work every time. I'd have to sit down and think about the physics isn't the right term, but the you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So this is how I solved it, and it used a formula that you'd already learned. So you should end up with 17/24, right? Is that what you ended up with? Okay. So it worked there. If it works every time, great. But I'd have to go through and try several of them and see if it works every time, because it may not. Okay, and I'm, like I said, I haven't sat down with this enough. All right, so did you end up with 17/24 when you tried that? Okay, great. Okay, next page. I would say for me, 33, 34, and 35 were the most time-consuming. Okay. And you'll notice, and you'll get sections like this where it's this illustration or this information is going to be used for the next 3 or 4 questions. All right. So anybody 33, 34, 35? 34? Okay, so we'll do 34 and 35. Okay, Gianna will install tile on a portion of the floor that will not be covered by cabinets. Which is the area in square feet of the portion of the floor that will not be covered by cabinets? They give me information on both sides of this, and you can see what you need to here, okay, enough to figure out that the area of this portion is 13 by 12, 13 by 12. But this is also cabinets. Yeah. And then it tells you, but I had to read the wording here a few times in order to understand this. Okay? What they're saying is that cabinets will be installed. Of course, we've got this. And even still, this was a little confusing because it's going to give me information that applies to the cabinets along the wall as well. But they're going to tell me, and 4 cabinets that are each 3 feet tall will be installed in the middle of the room. These are the only cabinets that will be installed. Each of them will be 2 foot wide and 2 foot deep. Okay? So that means each of these is a 2 by 2, which means this block is 4 by 4. Okay? So that's giving me 16 extra feet, 16 square feet. Okay? So I'm going to take the area of the room, which is 13 by 12, which I think comes out to like 156, right? And then I'm going to subtract these 16 feet in the middle of the room, and I should wind up with 140 feet squared. Okay? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of reading to do there, and the reading here is important. Okay? So sometimes you can get away with not reading everything, and then I'm guessing 35. Okay, so 35 took some time for me as well, because this is where I actually have to apply this information right here on the right-hand side, because what I have here is I've got 4 cabinets, okay, but these are also 2 foot wide and 2 feet deep, okay? So that's telling me how many cabinets are along this wall, and because we already know that they're 2 feet deep here, but I've got to take this 12 and divide it by 2 to find out how many cabinets. So there are 6 cabinets there. So I have a total of 10 cabinets. Okay, so knowing that, what I do with 36 is I'm going to take that $2,150 that I know that they charge me, and I'm going to subtract this $650, which is just like the base charge. They're going to charge $650 no matter how many cabinets they install. And I'm going to get $1,500, okay? And I'm going to divide that by 6 to find out what is the charge per cabinet, okay? And it comes out to $150 per cabinet that they install. And because we want to know what it is, how much it's going to cost me to install twice the number of cabinets, that's why I found out how many cabinets there were. So I'm going to take that 10 times 2, which tells me if we're going to install double the cabinets, it's going to be 20 cabinets. Okay, so now I'm taking it times my rate, so it's 20 times 150, plus the standard $650 to come and install cabinets. Okay, so that comes out to the $3,650 without me doing all that math up there. Hopefully you understand it now, even though I haven't drawn it all up there. Okay, so yeah, the most time consuming because it required the most reading, going back and forth for me, underlining things, right, and trying to make sense out of it. Okay, what about this side, 36 through 38? 36 through 38? 36 and 38? 36. Okay, so the first 36. Which of the following are the graph of the region in standard XY coordinate plane? Okay, so the first thing that I did, is split that, I think it's called a compound inequality, into 2 inequalities. So let's see, for instance, 1 is less than x plus y, and change that over into slope-intercept form. Okay? So what I did is I subtracted x. So I'm getting y is greater than negative x plus 1. Okay, so 1 is my y-intercept, and it has a slope of down 1 over 1. Okay, so I'm looking for any one of them that has a y-intercept of 1. Okay, positive 1. There's only 2 that do that. This one here and this one here. The problem with G is that notice its slope is positive. Okay, J has a negative slope. I could stop right there and say it's got to be J. Okay, but we can take that a step further and notice that it says that y is greater than, so I know it's shaded above that line. And then you could do the same thing with the other part, just so that we're familiar with it. Okay, and take x plus y is less than 2, subtract x, right, over to the other side. So y is less than negative x plus 2, and you're going to see that it has a y-intercept of positive 2, but it's still going down at the same rate, so it should be parallel to that line, and it's shaded below it. So we see how that works right there. Does that help explain 36 a little bit and how we get there? So split it into 2 inequalities, solve it for y equals mx plus b or y-intercept form. All right, go from there, okay? Was that a little easier than we were making it out to be, or than we feared it was? Okay, so that was 36, and we had also 38 to look at. 38. I think this is maybe a little easier than what you're making it out to be as well. Which of the following describes a true relationship between these two functions, graph below in the standard xy coordinate plane? What they're looking for is the number of solutions.
Yeah, I would do my table.
Well, the solutions are where they cross at, right? Okay, so it has two solutions. That's all I really need to know. And it knows for exactly two values of x, which are going to be there and there, right? So there's two x values where they cross. All right? Yeah. If they show you a graph and they give you lines and they're asking for solutions or even number of solutions, we're looking for specific number of times and places where they cross each other. Whether it's crossing the x-axis or two different equations where they cross at. Okay? But they like to throw stuff like that in there where you're feeling like things are getting harder and harder and harder, and so we end up making questions sometimes harder than they really are. All right, last page for today anyway. 39 through 42. 41 and 42. 41, okay. 41 is probably one that I would put on my list. Which of the following vertical lines cuts ABCD into two trapezoids with equal areas? Where's my... Okay, so this is where you got to go back up here, right? Okay, so if we're looking for x values, right, essentially that's what we're talking about here on 41, is where x equals. So we're talking about drawing a vertical line that's going to split this. There's several of these that I can eliminate right off the bat looking at the x values that I have here. Notice it says like 2.5. Well, 2.5 is going to split it like right there. Okay, so that's obviously not splitting it in half, right? And I think 3.5 is your next one, which is split it like right there. Still obviously not 1/2, right, in terms of areas. And I think the next one they give you is what, 5.5? All right, so it should come down between either 5.5 or 6.5, correct? Okay, so let's remember how area of a trapezoid works. Okay, let's call this, 5.5, and that's my x value, right? Which means my y value here is 4, okay? And if I come down here, I'm at 5.5, 1. Okay, so let's look at our distances. What's the distance between 3 and 5.5? Well, that's 2.5, right? Okay, distance between 2 and 5.5 is 3.5. Okay, the distance between 5.5 and, 9 is going to be what, 3.5? Okay, and the distance between 5.5 and 12 is something like 6.5. Okay, so if we're using 5.5, right, because we know that the other two are obviously wrong, so let's see what we get here. So this would be, my formula for area of a trapezoid is base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2, correct? So this first one would be 2.5 plus 3.5, and we know the height of this is 3, because from 1 to 4 is 3, right? 3 divided by 2. So 2.5 plus 3.5 is, what, 6? Yep. 6 times 3 is 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9, right? Not all that hard to do. And now we need to do the other one. So we've got 3.5 plus 6.5 times 3 divided by 2. Well, 6.5 plus 3.5 is what, 10? 10 times 3 is 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. Those two areas are not the same. Therefore, it must be 6.5. Okay? And I went through and I checked it. Okay? Because I'm going to end up moving everything this way, I actually don't really have to change all that much. This is going to end up becoming 3.5. This is going to end up becoming 2.5. This is going to move up to 4.5. That's going to move down to 5.5. And as I change those, I'm going to get areas of 12 and 12. Okay, but I don't actually have to do that because 2.5 and 3.5 were clearly wrong visually. 5.5 was really close. right? If I move it over just one more, I'm going to be there. Do I need to do the math for 6.5? No. Test taking skill says, I don't have enough time to waste. I have already eliminated 3 out of the 4 options, therefore the 4th option has to be the correct one. Right? But I did do the math, and I did check it, and it does work. Does it make more sense to you now? Okay. All right, so that was 41. Was there anything else on that list? 42. Okay, so this is what I call the rushing nesting doll question, right? Where I'm taking something and putting it inside of something else and taking something else and putting it inside of that smaller something, okay? So f of g of 1/2. So normally speaking, we're going to be taking this g and we're going to plug it into this x and that x. So what we would normally do is we would say, 1 over x minus 1 over x, right? I'm putting in 1 over x every time where I see x, correct? All right, but because this is 1/2 going in for the x in g, every time where I see x in g, I'm going to put 1/2. Right, which makes it a little confusing. But think about it this way, in terms of what I'm going to plug in my calculator to do this. Okay, I'm taking 1 divided by 1 divided by 2. Right? So just to keep my life simple, I'm going to calculate this. I don't need the pencil paper going through all the method. What is 1 divided by 1? And what's 1 divided by 2? Well, hold on. I got to rethink this. 1 divided by 1 divided by 2. Go ahead and plug it in. Okay, we should get, because it, well, I'm explaining it wrong. This is, it won't let me do that. Okay, and suddenly it does. All right, this is 1 divided by 1/2, right? Which is essentially, a fraction divided by a fraction, which means I would multiply by the reciprocal, correct? Yes? Okay. So 1 divided by 1/2 means I'm going to actually multiply by 2. So I should get 2 there, correct? Okay. And then on this part, I'm getting, 1 divided by 1 divided by 1/2. So this is what you thought that was, and so we're actually going to do that, which means I am getting 1/2 for that. 1 divided by 1 divided by 1/2. And so what I end up with here is 3/2. Okay, but that is a confusing question. It is tough because you've got multiple fractions being divided. Okay, I don't know if I made that any easier for you or not. Okay. Okay. 43 through 46.
44, 45, 40.
So everything on this page then, everything in this column then, that's fine. 43. Okay. This is what I did with this because they tell me we're going to multiply a by 2, and they tell me what everything does. Is I made up numbers to put in for everything. Okay, because it's algebraic, I went ahead and I made it numerical. So this is my formula. So what I did is I picked numbers that were relatively easy to work with. So for A is the amount that I'm putting in to the account. So I just made that $100. Okay, I made my rate 0.5, okay, or 50%, which is a lot, but it's not going to matter, okay? And I made Y in my years, I made that 10 years. You could pick whatever numbers you want here so long as you're consistent, okay? And then I found out what that would be. So I just solved for this. So I did 1/2 and then plugged in my numbers. So 100 times 0.5 times 10 plus 100 divided by 12 times 10, right? Numbers that are easy. I didn't pick complicated numbers, all right? And that gave me 35/12. Doesn't really matter, but that's what I got. Okay? Because the question is going to ask me, what is going to be the relationship? What is happening to P if I double A? All right? So I'm going to go back through here again, except the only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change my A. Instead of 100, I'm plugging in 200. Okay? I'm doubling A. And I'm going to hit, enter again after I've done all of that. And it actually, in this case, gives me 35/6. Okay? So what happens to P? Well, I went from 35/12 to 35/6. So what I did is I took 35/12 divided by 35/6. Okay, and I got an answer of 2, which means I doubled P. Okay? So you could plug in all your own numbers, you should get the same relationship. You should see that 35/6 is bigger, 35/12 is bigger than 35/6. Okay? I don't know. I don't know that that's the best way to do it, but that's how I did it because I needed to make sense out of it quickly. And if I was trying to solve it algebraically, all those variables were really going to confuse me.
Well, I was like, there's no way to multiply by 2. That's too obvious.
That's what I did.
Yeah, I know, like, whenever it says when A is multiplied by 2, I was like, there's no way.
There's got to be something more complicated to it. So that's why instead of leaving it as an algebra problem, I turned it into a numerical problem, right? Because that's what algebra does, is it says, this works if I plug numbers into these variables, right? It will work every time. So, that's why we even do algebra, so we can create formulas to solve problems, to solve any problem given that scenario. All right, 44. All right, how many who had 44? 44. Okay. The points 6, 4, and 412 lie on the standard XY coordinate plane shown below. Point D lies on EF between E and F somewhere. It's not in the middle. It just says in between. Okay? And it says the EF is 4 times the length of DE. What are the coordinates of D? So what I did is I found the length from E to F first. Okay? And I did that. My favorite way of doing these is just doing the Pythagorean theorem to find distance, because I'm quicker at that than I am the distance formula, because I hate trying to find coordinates and then doing the whole square root and all that kind of thing. So from 6 to 14 is 8, and from 4 to 12 is 8. All right, well, that tells me something, that if this is a right triangle and that's 8 and 8, this must be 8 radical 2, right? I've just done this long enough that that's what I see whenever I see that. I see an isosceles right triangle that must be a 45, 45, 90, which means my ratios are x to x radical 2. Okay, can we all see that now? Okay, so what we're saying then is that if this distance is 8 radical 2, then the distance from E to D is 1/4 of that, right? So I could divide 8 radical 2 divided by 4. That's going to give me 2 radical 2, correct? Okay? So what we're saying then is that this distance is 2 radical 2, which means this must be 2 and 2. So I'm going up 2 from 6, and I'm going over 2 from 4. Or I'm sorry, the other way around. I'm going over 2 from 6, I'm going up 2 from 4. It doesn't really matter because I'm adding 2 to either of them, which means if 6 plus 2 is 8, 4 plus 2 is 6, so my new coordinates are 8, 6. Okay? That's just how I solved it. I'm not saying that there's not another way, but I thought that was fairly easy going and looking at it that way. Okay? Okay, 45. 45 was you. Okay. I thought a lot about this in terms of I've got a matrix. I'm taking A times a matrix to get this, and actually found out that it's a lot easier. I don't know if this works every time. So, but A times this matrix equals this other thing. But A is really just kind of a constant. It's not a whole nother matrix. Okay? It's just a constant. So what I did is I took 27 divided by 6, because A times 6 equals 27. And that actually is equal to 4.5, which means A has to equal 4.5. Okay, so I'm going to multiply every number in this matrix by 4.5 to get those. Okay, but I only need x plus z, and because I only need x plus z, I'm going to take 4.5 times 2 and 4.5 times 4. Okay, well 4.5 times 2 is 9, and 4.5 times 4 is 18. Of course, it's double 2, so that makes sense. And 9 plus 18, because we want x plus y, is 27. How many of these do we feel like we made them a lot more difficult than they really were? When we start looking at the math actually used to solve them, we're like, these 46 questions, or these last 21 questions really weren't terrible. It's just getting your thought processes to work that way. Yeah, so that's why I think that maybe this strategy of actually doing ACT questions rather than focusing on slopes or different kind of question types, just taking the ACT and getting used to, okay, how do I take what I know and apply it to this type of question? Okay, 46 was arguably at the time, man, I racked my brain over this for a long time, and then I had to write an equation for it, because to me, this was confusing. All right, a container is 1/8 full of water, but I don't know how big it is, right? They're not saying 1/8 of a cup of water. They're just saying 1/8 of whatever it is. And then I'm going to add 10 cups to it, and it's only going to be 3/4 full. So this is the equation I wrote. 1/8 of the container, but I don't know what it is. So I'm going to say that the container is x. So 1/8 of x, and because of is multiplication, I can write 1/8 x. And then I'm going to add 10 to it. And it's going to equal 3/4 of whatever the volume is. Okay? Well, that I can solve, right? Because I can subtract 1/8 from 3/4, right? And get my x's all together. And whenever I do that, I get 10 equals 5/8 x. All right? And then I can multiply 10 by 8/5. Right? And that's going to, 10 times 8 is 80. 80 divided by 5 is 16. Okay? It's 16 cups. Okay? Once I did that, I'm like, okay, this is a lot easier. But for a long time, like, I couldn't get my brain to do that. Okay? But whenever I started to make the volume of it the unknown and give it a variable and say, okay, 1/8 of this is the really, I'm talking about the same thing whenever I say 3/4 of this, then I can write an equation, I can solve that. Okay? So did we get most of our questions answered on this? Okay. Let's see, Dylan, will you hand those out? And I'm going to close this up.